Thank you for scrubbing down for today's show. I appreciate it. Uh, wow, there's a lot of stuff happening. I was talking about RFK Jr. before and how he was on television the other day doing push-ups alongside Pete Hegseth. I always also talked about the fact that in producing these reports that he has to produce as head of the HHS, the reports cited a bunch of stuff that were clearly run through AI that involved studies that were completely fictitious. So this is the kind of thing that's going on there at HHS with this RFK Jr., who's in charge of so much and really dismantling that agency in so many ways. So we get to the COVID vaccines and a huge break from what are the normal recommendations for infants on a vaccine schedule, et cetera, to what the medical community, pediatric medicine community is recommending, and then what the government, now run by RFK Jr., anti-vaxxer, is recommending. Can you speak to what's happening here in that announcement?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought up the fitness videos that they were doing with RFK Jr. and Hesketh. I mean, it's great to see people working out and exercising, but it's a good reminder that just because you can do 100 pull-ups or 100 push-ups doesn't necessarily mean that you can make the best medical recommendations for our country. So let's just get that right out there. So the big breaking news, as you mentioned, this is the first time in 3 decades I heard that the American Academy of Pediatrics is going against the CDC recommendation on a vaccine. And it's for the COVID vaccine, and the recommendation is for infants from 6 months to 2 years. So just to backtrack, earlier in the summer, RFK fired the entire clinical advisory committee on vaccines, and that included a lot of pediatricians and members of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And he replaced them with members who, for the most part, are anti-vax and spread a lot of disinformation about vaccine safety. And so what the CDC currently had recommended, they don't recommend the COVID vaccine, the new one, for infants from 6 months to 2 years. They use language like, well, it's a shared decision-making between the kids, the parents, and the pediatricians. But what the American Academy of Pediatrics did yesterday was firmly recommended the COVID vaccine as part of the childhood immunization schedule for infants from 6 months to 2 years. And the main reason for this is because those infants don't have a fully developed immune system. As doctors, as medical professionals, we think it is best for kids that their first exposure to COVID should safely be from the vaccine, not from an infection. And we've seen time and again, like infants that come to the ER with COVID are very sick. I mean, as we're still seeing a lot of COVID cases in the ER in general among adults, but for the most part, everybody goes home because it's an upper respiratory infection. They're not hypoxic. They don't need to be hospitalized. And that's because the majority of us have hybrid immunity already from the last few years. We've gotten 1 or 2 doses of the vaccine. We've gotten 1 or 2 infections possibly. So we have that broad spectrum immunity against repeat infections that we don't get super sick. But for the infants, it's just not worth the risk that their first exposure is going to be from the COVID virus itself. And so that's why the AAP and their thousands of members came out and said, you know what, we are going to go against what the CDC says, and we recommend this vaccine for infants.
One of the things about COVID that is truly disturbing to me is not just the upper respiratory thing and not just the inflammatory aspects of it that are just still being understood. Right. But what I remember reading early on in the first year of COVID, and that was the prevalence of long COVID. And now I've subsequently read a bunch of stuff more about the prevalence of long COVID, and it's even more prevalent than was originally thought. Mm-hmm. And it can be even more debilitating than originally thought. And so when you put up those pictures of the infants, and we talk about the infant exposure to COVID, I think of the lasting impact of COVID, that it's not just a cough and an upper respiratory thing, that the effects of having COVID-19 and the latest mutations even could be devastating for a lifetime.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the take-home message for people is that when we've studied the effects of long COVID, those who are vaccinated have a much less, significantly less chance of developing long COVID complications than those who are not. So that's the take home message right there.
Wow, that's huge. Absolutely huge. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you about just on vaccines is this flu mist. Is that what it's called?
Right.
It's an at-home nasal vaccine.
Yeah, I am particularly excited about this. So this is from AstraZeneca. It's a needle-free nasal vaccine. So basically for the flu. And this is the first time ever in our history that people now have this availability to use this at home. And basically, it had been approved for a number of years. Like you could get it through your doctor's office, but now basically you go to the AstraZeneca website, you fill out a short questionnaire, and they send you the vaccine in a cold storage. It lasts for a couple months, and it's basically a spritz in each nostril, and you're done. It's for people 2 to 49 only, healthy individuals from 2 to 49, because we found that it wasn't as effective for those over 49, just because the immune system tends to be not as strong, and so you need the traditional intramuscular flu vaccine shot. But after last year, where we had 82 million cases and 1.3 million hospitalizations, and only half of adults and kids got the flu shot last year, it wreaked havoc through the ER for sure. And so I'm hoping that with this option now where you can order it, your insurance covers it. I think it's only a $9 shipping fee. It gets sent to your house. More people will do this. And I think, the intranasal vaccine is the future of vaccine technology, just because if you think about upper respiratory infections, when you first get infected with the cold or the flu, it gets into your nasal passages, your upper airway, and then spreads to your lungs. So why don't we spray the vaccine right in the nose and spawn those protective immune cells that'll protect us right in that area, like straight off the bat? I mean, I think that's the way to go. So hopefully we'll see a bigger uptake of people using the vaccine this year for the flu.
The flu
Well,
vaccine,
pregnant-
which is tweaked every year, is
Right.
what degree of effectiveness? I've always heard it's kind of 50-50. I always get it, but I always hear that it's 50-50.
Yeah. So just to remind people that the way the flu vaccine is designed is not to 100% say that if you get the flu shot, you're not going to get the flu. For the most part, it could do that, but it also just prevents severe illness, hospitalization, keeps you out of the hospital, keeps you from dying. I mean, flu can still kill you in some cases. And so, but you're right. Yeah. Every year we look at the current strains around the world and start in the Southern Hemisphere. And then for the Northern Hemisphere, we design a flu shot that's going to include what scientists think are the most likely going to be the prevalent strains. And so it's a little bit of a guess, but it's based on epidemiological data and what's happened in the Southern Hemisphere, which experiences their flu season before us.
Right.
So it ranges. It's about 40% plus protection against severe disease. So
and is it still being done, or what's happening? What's the future of the flu vaccine with this new administration?
yeah, so I think we may have touched on this briefly a few months ago. They originally RFK wasn't going to have the meeting with the scientific advisors to decide what was going to be in the flu shot, for which ones we were going to choose to order from pharmaceutical companies. But they ended up doing like a closed door session and basically just agreed with what WHO and the rest of the Western world was deciding. So they kind of, said they weren't going to do it and sort of like cast doubt on the whole thing, and then ended up doing it anyway. So
Interesting.
yeah.
So it's happening then, and you'd
Yeah.
recommend it, is the point.
And just one final point. Now we know that the flu always takes off between Halloween and Thanksgiving. That's usually in the ER. We start seeing a lot of cases. So we want people to be vaccinated like 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, because, with all the travel and being in the airport, you're going to be at pretty high risk. So if you do qualify for flu mist from AstraZeneca, I would recommend it has a 2-month shelf life in your fridge. So if you order it around September the latest, and then you'll have it in just one spray each side of the nose just after Halloween, I think you'd be well protected.
Gordon in our chat says, have not had flu or COVID. That's pretty extraordinary, I think. I mean, most people, although I know a couple of people, come to think of it, who haven't contracted
There's
COVID.
never been
Or at
anything
least-
like this.
Yeah, I mean, at least outward symptoms of it, you know? So I guess it's there. I don't know. Everything's just, it's sort of very specific to who you are, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah,
there's
where
a-
you
yeah.
you had it and you just didn't know.
Right, that's the point. You weren't manifesting any outward symptoms. All right, before I let you go, I'd always heard for a long time that aspirin, a daily aspirin is something that will help prevent heart disease, I think, or I think it was related to heart disease, wasn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, so
Even a
lot
baby aspirin, I'd heard. Yeah, go ahead. What's the
Right,
truth
yeah,
on
a
that?
lot of people, take a daily aspirin. Like daily aspirin keeps the doctor away, and and I still encounter a lot of patients in the ER who do that. But in 2024, the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, the same task force that RFK wants to gut, came out with a recommendation on aspirin that is more tailored to specific risk factors. So instead of saying this is for prevention of your first heart attack, okay, so if you've already had a heart attack, you've already had to take a daily aspirin anyway. But for people that have not had a heart attack, it's very specific now. So from the ages of 40 to 59, if you have risk factors for heart attack, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, family history of sudden cardiac death, then in shared decision making with your doctor, you can decide whether or not you should take a daily aspirin to prevent that first heart attack. But if you're 60 plus, they don't just clearly recommend that you take the aspirin because the risk of adverse events from aspirin, predominantly upper GI stomach bleeding, for example, outweighs the benefit. So it's very nuanced now. You just got to have that discussion with your doctor. If you're in that age range, 40 to 59, what are my risk factors for having that first heart attack? Should I take aspirin or not? So the take home point is, if you're taking a daily aspirin, maybe don't, and have that conversation with your doctor first.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Well, I feel as though we've been completely checked out, everybody. Gordon says, yes, my doctor told me to stop taking aspirin. Gordon is on top of things today. He's the guy who has not had the flu or COVID, and he's not on the aspirin train either. Wow.
He's living the dream.
Gail says, I haven't had COVID or flu, always getting vaccinated. My 47-year-old wouldn't get vaccines. He died in 2020, 3 weeks after contracting COVID. Wow, that's a cautionary tale, man. How sad. I'm sorry. Wow. I love talking to the doctor. Thank you for being here. I appreciate this. I think this is covered in general by my copay. And so I'll let you go back to your patients there in the ER. You can find Dr. Michael Daigneault on Fox 11 in Los Angeles and on iHeartRadio. I think you're going to be on the radio with me. When is it? Today or tomorrow? Tomorrow, right? Tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah,
At
tomorrow.
4:30, right?
Yeah, 4:30 on KFI Radio in Los Angeles. Love talking to you, and I really appreciate you making time for us. Thank you.
My pleasure, Mark. Take care.
All right. Dr.
Hi,
Michael
it's
Daigneault.
Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.